Citizen 2.0? We've always had the power to change, to influence, to create, and to destroy. That's right, as citizens. But what and who is Citizen 2.0? Is it the people here today? Is it people outside of this hall today? Is it government with citizens, government against citizens? But my description of Citizen 2.0 is that it's more than just active citizenship. It's not just about going to your town hall to have a say. It's not about participating. It's not just about voting. It's about this global shift between government, between citizens. It's the ebbs and flows between those. And you're part of it basically whether you want to be part of it or not. So I have a quote from Daniel Libeskind, who's an architect, and he says that design, democracy, and technology are important tools to become this active citizen. And that the future of cities will be shaped by citizens rather than just authorities. So you don't just have the mayor, the deputy mayor, who's telling you what to do and when to do it. You have citizens in partnership with government or against government doing these things. I don't know if any of you watched those TED videos. So for 2012, they've said that the City 2.0 is a TED Prize winner. And they speak of the City 2.0 being this amazing future city. It's wonderful, it's exciting, it's a utopia, and citizens are involved. But we sort of disagree. This future city, this excitement, this wonderful city of roads and transport and buildings, it can't exist without you and I. So we're saying the City 2.0 cannot exist without a citizen 2.0. How social media has impacted me, I started out just with an account. I called it Future Cape Town. And I was just walking around town. I was tweeting my best ideas about the city. From the age of, I think, about 10, I saw this picture. Okay, Cape Town is bidding for the Olympic Games. Wonderful picture. I was age 8. I was like, Cape Town is actually relevant. We're not just this irrelevant city in the world. I suppose back then it was more about my passion for what we could be, our master planning. And I think that picture sort of encapsulates where it all started for me. It was sort of beyond architecture and engineering. And there have been more of these visions. If you follow media, if you follow newspapers, you'll see that they pop up in the media and social media, and sometimes we pay attention. But from age 8, I've been following all these visions of the future city, of what Cape Town could be. And as most of you know, sometimes none of it ever happens. Okay, so we've seen wonderful pictures of a stadium nearby in Blue Downs, an athletic stadium at UWC, but they don't actually happen. So what is our role in this bigger picture as citizens? And I think this is the question that Citizen 2.0 asks. Which citizen, beyond an architect, an engineer, and a town planner, actually had an impact on that image over there? That's just outside the CBD. It's currently covered by rail tracks. And what they're saying is, let's cover up the rail tracks, and sort of build some sort of new neighborhood over it. But beyond the architect, who is a great architect, how do we get involved in that? Should you have a degree? Should you be a planner? Should you be an architect? The My City bus system, has anybody used it here? Ever? Yeah. Okay, for the World Cup and after the World Cup. It was once a vision. It started out with somebody saying, hey, let's go to South America and see what they're doing and bring it here. It's also a vision. You would have seen it in a newspaper today. It's reality. So where does social media fit into all this? I started tweeting about pavements that should be changed. I started tweeting about my own visions. I would say things like, why aren't we bidding for the Olympic Games? Why aren't we bidding for the Commonwealth Games? And the 2010 FIFA World Cup came, and everyone knows here that our brand as a city, our brand as people, we're all geared to that one thing. Okay? But what happened on July the 12th? What happened for you? What happened for me? Okay, what was our next deadline? What is our next goal? And I think the reason we've sort of driven our Twitter account into a brand is because we wanted to know what the next event was. But could we create that event every day? Could on social media you and I be asking the questions, what is future Cape Town? What are we moving towards as a city? And I think, I'm not a marketing person, but I've discovered that a brand is not a logo. Okay? This is created at MSK. Okay? But it seemed to have captured so many Cape Townians, and our following and our readership and our brand has grown from a few hundred followers to close to 9,000 now. So how do we now take this following, this movement, people listening, the mayor listening, the deputy mayor, and turn it into something beyond just the online social media account where we tweet things? So if we look at the tools of design or democracy design and technology, let's see how the citizen can get involved. And I'm just going to share the first part of Danny Leibson's quote on democracy. And he says, what is missing from all these visions and is emerging today is a central and co-creator of the city, the empowered citizen. He says, I'm not talking about individuals who admirably work towards a more sustainable or a greener city, or of a democratic commitment and openness in which the tools of design give each citizen, all of you here today and myself, a stake in the actual decision and form-making of the city. The city will therefore no longer be with one authoritative center. It will have a structure as messy as democracy itself. So some of you may still be a bit skeptical. Well, how do I tell the mayor what to do? How do I tell the premier what to do? Why isn't Hillzilla replying to my tweets? So if some of you are worried that social media doesn't have an impact, see Cairo. Okay? So what happened in Egypt? The government started blocking Twitter, they started blocking Facebook, started blocking websites, and the people rose up. And they challenged the government, not just tweeting, sitting in their rooms, walking around town. They gathered over there on Tahrir Square. Social media alone did not create that. It's people who got out on the streets, it's people who decided to have a say, to use social media even though it is blocked to create that change. We're not saying this should happen in Cape Town. We are saying that if enough people gather and use the power of democracy and social media, change can happen. So governments can block Twitter, they can block Facebook. I was in Shanghai last year, I had to use something called a VPN to use Twitter, don't tell the Chinese government. But they can't ignore social media. So we're quite lucky in Cape Town. I know there's a lot of fuss about Hillzilla and politicians saying the weirdest things on social media. But through the Twitter town halls, for certain political parties, they've created this vibe where we can actually engage with them. They become less authoritative and they become more accessible to you every day in ways that you want them to be. That's how I've met most of the politicians I've met today, is just through social media. And to give a really sort of frank example, Alan Windley is the MEC for Economic Development and Tourism. And since social media, we've met several times, informally, formally at events, at the launch of the convention center. We presented proposals to him. So when I was traveling to Rio, I do what I do in Cape Town. I say, what can we learn from Copenhagen, besides the beautiful people? It's wide pavements, it's cycle lanes, it's the simple things. People can have a drink on the beach. You can't go to Seapan Promenade. Bev Schaefer will come and put you in jail if you have a drink on the beach. And since then, we've just engaged, we've met, we've shared ideas, and we've created this accessible, sort of transparent governance and citizenship. But it's not me against the government, it's not you against the government. It's sort of what you want it to be. How do you want to engage? Do you want to engage more in public participation? Do you want to create something that's against government? So it's an option. It can be with government, it can be behind, it can be before, it can be around. And what really irks me is that you have these media releases coming from government, and they expect the communication with citizens to be this long media release with quotes and statements. And I don't know if you've been to Cape Town Stadium, but before every match, it's this long media statement. It's got the bus times, and it's got which station. You can hardly find your way around it. Whereas if you have access to the internet, you can share this through your own future Cape Town. Share with your friends, tell them when you're going, how you're going, and it's sort of changing the shift of how they can communicate. If we find things out in public documents, it's not WikiLeaks, but if somebody's proposing a new building, we can share it immediately. There's no barriers to when and how and when government wants to communicate and have a media conference and have a press conference. And Daniel Liebson also talks about Citizen 2.0 and design. Okay, what is design? It's, things like fancy chairs, wonderful magazines, but he says the design of the city will no longer be simply linear and causal. So how do we start designing our actual city? It's not the straight line, it's not mayor down to citizen, it's shifting, it's messy. And how do we start influencing that? So what we did was we decided to ask the question, what if we take social media and the concept of social media just from online, constant tweets and Facebooking, to offline? What if citizens could actually have a vote on urban design issues? If you could decide as Cape Townians to vote and take down the Foreshore Freeway. If you as Cape Townians could decide to vote on what to do with Cape Town Stadium. If you could decide to vote on how housing in the city will look in the future. And so I met someone through social media, through Twitter, Liam Beatty, and he's an exhibition specialist. I can't create exhibitions, I can't design structures. And we joined up through that. We met at one event, and we created that. It's about 2.5 meters high, and it's an elaborate voting booth. It says, what if you could vote in these things? What would you choose? And I know a lot of people have said to me, but I don't just want our communities to look like number 1, which is an informal city. I don't want them to just look like number 2, which is this wonderful Copenhagen housing. I'm not really interested in suburbia, and I don't like Hong Kong's high density, high rise, zero public space. But what really got to me was that you actually sometimes have to vote. You don't like every option, but based on your experience and your beliefs and your morals and all sorts of things, culture and background, you can now vote on what you want your communities to look like. So just think about, in 5-10 years, if this becomes reality. I know in some European cities there's things called referendums, where they do get to vote. If there's a new highway proposed, they get to vote for it. They either say yes or no, and the citizens have a vote. It's like your elections, and they either do it or they don't. So what if Cape Town put these in public spaces and allow people to walk by on any average day, pop in their vote, and have a say? To start gauging, not just through social media, but through reality, and hopefully impact the city that is being formed. Has anybody heard of World Design Capital 2014? No? Yeah? Okay. What is it? It's a title given to Cape Town, which recognizes Cape Town using design socially, economically, to change the city. Okay, it's not about fancy chairs and couches. So design is not just for a select few, but it's a participatory process. It's a part of Citizen 2.0, this movement, this shift. Okay. So what did we do? Cape Town Partnership approached us to cover the inspection of Cape Town by the design capital judges. They said, come along, Future Cape Town, share design beyond what people think it is. So we went along. For 2 days, covering the entire city. I think at that time we had about 3,000 followers. It's not a massive amount. But I think for the first time, Cape Townians started to understand, as we were tweeting, going from Khayelitsha to Stellenbosch to Woodcar, to your trendy zones for the Fringe and Woodstock and those sort of things, what design actually meant. And social media just sort of spread this out. And although we had 3,000 followers, if more people start retweeting, you reach a wider audience. So we're now breaking down this concept of the citizen and what they can do about design. And you're mixing reality and online and social media, and you're saying, although you have all this tweeting happening and all these inspections and trips and photos you're sharing, things are actually happening in reality. So you've got the mix of reality again with the citizen, and design and the definition there sort of breaks down a bit. It becomes more accessible.
Removing the abusive tweets.
And so although we were just a social media account and a website, we started asking, what is our own design ethos? As non-designers, what do we believe in? And I soon formed a team through meeting them at events, at TED events, online, fan mail. And so we had a bunch of architects, engineers, and brand specialists and people in government, all under the age of sort of 30, 25. And we started asking ourselves, what have we created in social media, and how can we implement this in reality? So we looked at this one space in Hamburg. It's a dramatic setup. It's a don't know if many of you know, but Heidelberg has tremendous issues socially, economically. There was violence, some riots and so forth, and it's got this dramatic space. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but behind it, it's the mountains, sort of the whole Hart Bay Mountains and towards Chatham Peak, and it's got the ocean. So you've got this raised playground overlooking the whole space. So if we go back to this statement, we say, Citizen 2.0 can be about design, it can be about a community-led and democratic social space. Okay, so beyond the jargon, it's not about us going to the kids and saying, please get onto Twitter and tweet your ideas to the space. It's the mix of both that social media asking Cape Townians, what should this be? What should a playground be in a place so tense, a place so difficult? And then mixing it by actually going to the site and speaking to people. At 5 p.m. at 6 p.m. kids playing in this playground. And that's sort of the design we came up with. Another one over there. And then we went to Mfuleni, which is sort of I don't like using the word township because, it's just a suburb with different types of homes. And I mean, I went to Goods last year. Well, I've been there before, but I went again, as you go, and it's good shopping centers as boring as Canal Walk. And so we started liaising with the community forum of Mfuleni and taxi rank, and it's got this amazing dynamic. But let's get to the public space of how community now informs design. Okay. So Citizen 2.0 is part of a process to build a community brand and public space. What is Mfuleni? It started in 1974. In 2014, the year of all design capital will be 40 years old. So it's a new community. It doesn't have a thing. People say Carlington. It's a whole city of suburbs. It's not this conglomerate space. So then it's much smaller, it's across the road, nobody lives in it. And we said, what if so over on the right-hand side is a taxi rank, and on the left is some sort of really crappy market stall by the City of Cape Town. And we said, well, how can people now inform design with their voices? What is their brand? How do we form a brand through public space? And we aim to create a pedestrian path linking the one end of Mfuleni to the taxi rank. That's what you do every day. It's currently this pothole space. It's a bit dark, it's a bit dodgy, a few bottle stalls along the way. And so although these are the colors we propose for creating this pedestrian space with a pedestrian focus, if you look closely at it, it's sort of like a long zebra crossing. And it's saying pedestrian priority. You close at both ends. But how do you take the brand of Mfuleni and impose on that, rather than us coming and saying we want these colors, we want this sort of space? And again, it's going beyond social media. So we've created an account called Future Mfuleni so that we can start having these engagements on Twitter and on social media. And hopefully over time, the brand of Mfuleni will develop. You have, the blue could mean a link to a certain market. The green color could extend from the public space down the road to all restaurants. And so people start knowing about the area, they start building a brand, and an unknown township becomes something. This is not my expertise technology. I have a MacBook, but I don't know the latest trends. I heard Dave Duarte said iTunes is coming next month in South Africa. But again, although we have this following on social media, again I'm asking, what is technology beyond just online? So we believe social media can spark an idea, you can share it, you can inspire, and you can result in action. And the part that most appeals to me is the action part. I can tweet the most profane things at all sorts of government politicians and all sorts of company leaders on Twitter and Facebook, but what does it mean in terms of action? How do we get there? The link between your first message and the last bit of the puzzle, sort of a journey. You don't know where it's going to go, but you hope that it results in action that you want. So along came Moonlight Maps. I don't know if you've heard of it. Being part of it. And it started out as this guy called Ellard and Daniel Graham, and what they did was they just, they had a few followers, they tweeted, what if we cycled at night, once a month, on a full moon, at 9 p.m.? Okay, so let's say we have a few more followers, we have 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 followers, we shared that. And soon it became a monthly event where Cape Townians, I just got a bicycle sort of a year ago, would just come to the Greenpoint Circle once a month at full moon, and at 9 p.m., they would cycle around the city. It started out as 22, 23 people. We were like, okay, this is a lot. It went to 100 the next time. Helen Ziller came along, it became 1,000. It's not the end of the journey, you know, all these hipsters cycling around town, no offense. What does it actually do? So it started creating some tension between the city of Cape Town, who said it's now an event. You must apply, you know, for applications in 130 pages, split in, you're now an event. And then the Minister of Economic Development said to me, he said at an event in Pretoria, he said, when 1,000 cars come into town, you know, for an event, we have all sorts of traffic plans. Traffic cops everywhere, it's an event at the stadium, we make all sorts of plans. But when 1,000 cyclists come into town, we decide to block it. You know, it must now become an event. They take up so much less space, but they don't get the support that they need. So it's not the end of the journey for Moonlight Mass, I don't think. It starts asking, how do we now change the cycling infrastructure in Cape Town? And from Moonlight Mass, through creating this exposure and lobbying, the government's now saying you have a whole bunch of people cycling. How can all this movement through space inform design? And we cycle along these routes, and they're wonderful, most of them. But you come down Somerset Road, and there's this big concrete chain in your way. And you've got 1,000 people going, there are going to be some accidents. And it's simple ways of just saying, how do we go beyond social media, an idea that was sparked, to an event, to action, and then hopefully to a better cycling infrastructure, to create a city that we have now sort of formed together. Social media can bring global issues to the table for debate and discussion. Future Cape Town is a website in Cape Town, and we've collaborated with Blog in London called This Big City. And we decided that people weren't discussing the issues enough. And these might seem like pretty petty issues, you know, cities and wonderful visions and things. But in 10 years' time, in Africa at least, and already in many other parts of the world, more than half the people will be living in cities. What happens when you add 1 million people to Cape Town in 5-10 years' time? How do you make the city better then? We started something called City Talk. It's again once a month, it's online, it's an hour, we create a hashtag. And it started out as 10,000 people, you know, it sort of formed a reach of 10,000 people. We started bringing in partners like Siemens, it went to 80,000. And so now more people using this hashtag once a month, discussing issues they weren't really sort of involved with. You know, what is accessible cities? What is urban identity? What does all this jargon mean? And so now it's gone to 80,000, we've had 9 of them already. And we continue just to promote these discussions so it becomes a bit more accessible for the average Cape Townian and people across the world. And that's sort of the hashtag brand of City Talk. It's saying, create the hashtag, add your voice, and hopefully somebody will listen to the discussions we're having. I think one of the most exciting things is this new platform called Visa. And what they've done is, you can now mix it Facebook, Twitter, service delivery issues, wherever you are, and you can share them, where you are, whenever you want to. So to finish off, the future city will be more like a work of art. It will appear a bit chaotic, and there will be overlapping and competing visions. You have these tools of democracy, design, and technology to influence this. So become the citizen entrepreneur with social media and create the impact. Thanks.